Welcome, everyone. This is a panel on online job-relevant degrees. And I think you'll agree with me that there is no more important topic at this conference than online job-relevant degrees. I'm Ryan Craig. I run a firm called Achieve Partners, and I write quite a bit on the present and future of higher education. And if you've read anything that I've written, you probably know that I'm a bit of a curmudgeon about higher education's failure or inability to align with what employers are actually seeking in the market. And the ramifications of that are crystal clear. We've got tens of millions of workers or candidates who are out of position relative to what employers are seeking. We have yesterday, for the first time in American history, over 10 million unfilled jobs in America. So there's just a massive misalignment of our education and employment ecosystems. And obviously, as we hopefully are recovering from the COVID epidemic, we recognize that online degrees need to play a major role here. We've had coming off a year when the vast majority of 50 million US students have been online, at least in part, if not in full. And so making sure that online degrees are actually job relevant and preparing students for work and employment and socioeconomic mobility has never been more important. So I'd like to introduce our panel. Well, actually, I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves. So we're going to go down the row here and let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to kick off the conversation.
Sure. Hi, Brooke Elliott. I'm Associate Dean in the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois.
Vistasp Karbhari, Professor of Civil Engineering, Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at the University of Texas, Arlington. I used to be president till last year, which means for the first time I get to say whatever I like, and no one can stop me.
Hello, everyone. Adam Fein, Vice President for Digital Strategy and Innovation at the University of North Texas.
Hi, I'm Jeff Maggioncalda. I'm the CEO of Coursera.
And I'm Marni Baker-Stein. I'm the Chief Academic Officer and Provost at Western Governors University.
That's great. So maybe we'll start with Marni and come down from Jeff. And I'm going to ask the question, as you think about an online or blended modality relative to a traditional on-ground modality, how does that help facilitate closer proximity to employers and employment in terms of job-relevant curricula?
So I find this a fascinating question because I do think obviously modality, delivery modality, online or hybrid delivery modalities have allow for greater accessibility to education for those who are earning and learning at the same time, who are working full-time while they're going to school, or who are working full-time after they've gone to school and they're trying to upskill or rescale while they are balancing work and family and commute, et cetera. So from an accessibility point of view, online as a delivery modality is really critical for earner-learners. In terms of job relevancy, while I think there are many players in the online space who realize, hey, my value proposition is for this working professional, so I am going to more tightly align my degrees and credentials of value to workplace value so that I can attract these learners and I can serve them well and I can really see that factored graduate impact once they complete. So I think we're seeing a lot of big online providers move in this direction because of the nature of the learners that they serve. But those two things are not necessarily, online modality and relevancy to work are not necessarily always tightly tied together.
Sure. Jeff, your thoughts?
Well, I'm sure we'll talk a ton about all this stuff. One of the things I'd like to add, in addition to what Marni said, clearly there's an adult population out there who's working. They can't go to the campus. I mean, there you go. My rough estimate, this is back of the envelope, if you look at all working age people in the world, and if you look at the population of men and women in each of those countries, and you look historically at the gross enrollment ratios by country, by gender, there's like 2.3 billion people who are working age in the world who've never even started any higher education. So the stock of people out there who don't even have any exposure to a college degree is way higher than the number of 18, 19, 20-year-olds out there. And everyone needs to have new skills. And so clearly there's an ability to reach a population that you're just not going to reach. And most of them are working. My guess would be that 90% of the 14,500 or so degree learners on our university partners on Coursera are working. I talked to a number of them. They talk about work. They talk about the case studies and what that means at each person's workplace, in workplaces around the country and around the world. So there's a real rich work environment that gets injected by classmates in the conversation. And then the final thing I'll just remark is that with respect to job relevance, having a platform that has 5,000 courses on cryptocurrency, Internet of Things, double entry bookkeeping, cybersecurity, there's just so much material, including material that is very late breaking and very relevant to jobs, that instructors and professors don't have to create all the content themselves. They can grab other pieces that are very current and job relevant, and they can integrate that into their courses, or deans can integrate it into full degree programs. And so I think the integration of content from many sources can keep it more current and more job relevant.
That's great. Adam, you want to kick off?
Sure. So I concur for sure. We are an urban campus, so minority majority in the DFW region, public higher education institution, and we're fortunate that we kind of embrace both. We have options. So for example, for our partner program with the Dallas Cowboys in sport entertainment management, we have an online version and a blended version. And there's options for internships and externships for both. For the Coursera program we have, which is a bachelor's completion program through Coursera, we have an online version with Coursera, and again, an in-person version in DFW. So I think there are opportunities to be job relevant in both blended and online, but my concurring here is that there's a lot more people who are in the market for fully online. We're lucky to be in a metroplex of 8 million people, but not everybody is. And so you can't maybe drive 20 minutes down the road to Frisco or Plano and sit in the offices of the Dallas Cowboys and do that internship. So we have to be prepared for those situations all around the world.
I mean, it sounds like the benefits are primarily built around accessibility for the students, right? But I guess my question is there anything intrinsic to online delivery that lends itself to better connectivity, integration with employers so that we can maybe even help reduce that cycle time in terms of figuring out whether or not this program is effective at preparing students for work?
So I'm glad you asked that, because let's take the example of nursing, which is one of the prime online programs at the University of Texas at Arlington. And before you all start worrying, oh my gosh, you can teach nurses and they can go and work online, the answer is absolutely yes. And they're probably much better qualified than a lot of other nurses. That's an example of where the relevance comes in, because these are students who, maybe I should go back, these are learners, since a lot of them are adults who have already started working. These are learners who may have an associate's degree in nursing. They've already been working out there. They're working at a hospital. They're now going online to get their BSN or the MSN. The link is between the hospital, the workplace, and the university. So what's happening is they are working side by side with getting a degree. They're actually getting instruction, not just from the university, but from their place of work. Because of that linkage, a lot of the curriculum has to be updated all the time. It's not just updated once a year, it's sometimes updated once a term, and maybe even more, because the regulations change and these nurses are on the floor. So they have to learn the latest. So the other thing that there's a big advantage of is that we often talk about bringing people in from the corporate world to teach our students. And we have to go through logistics about when they are free, when we are free, when the students are free. If it's online, that does not become a problem. You can have a chief nursing officer of one hospital going online to all the other nursing hospitals. And we do the same thing in engineering, or we can do the same thing in education. And I think that's one of the things that we often forget when it's online. We talk about access and we talk about flexibility. What we don't talk about is the power of actually bringing the employer and the employee closer together with the university or the college, then serving as the facilitator of that, plus obviously to the provider of the education and the knowledge.
And that just doesn't it's not only restricted to sort of asynchronous content, one-way
Right.
delivery.
It could be any-
synchronous, it could be mentoring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Brooke?
Yeah, I think for us, a few things. When you think about just the online modality, when I think about residential education, you have individuals from all around the world that are converging in a common location to have a common experience. But in online, you have individuals who have a common experience all around the world. And so in our courses, you have a student who wakes up in Dubai and lives and works in Dubai, and they're paired in a group with another student who wakes up in Champaign-Urbana, right? And they have very different experiences. And so they're able to bring those experiences to bear, and I think it really enriches the educational experience. The other part, I think, in terms of really tying it to job relevance, in our courses, our assessments are designed to prompt our students to think about the skills they're learning and how are they going to take it back and apply it in their day-to-day job. And we get stories all the time about how they made an impact immediately. We also have a very strong experiential learning program, and so our students bring live client projects into the classroom. And so we allow, we scope projects for them, but they can scope their own projects. And so they're able to bring to bear, they have the common knowledge of, again, individuals all around the world that are contributing, then they get to take that value add back to their own organization. So that's just another way to think about really tying it to job relevance.
Right. Sir, go ahead, Jeff.
Can I just add one more thing on that kind of question of signal, like what are employers really looking for? Clearly, when you have students who are also working, that really tightens up the feedback loop between the teaching and the workplace. But another thing is, on Coursera, we have Coursera for Business. Over 2,000 companies have hired Coursera to provide our university partners courses. These are university courses, on a platform being delivered to millions of people working in the biggest companies in the world, all around the world. We have bundled them into what we call skill sets, which is for certain jobs. The companies are saying, I need a data engineer. Here are the skills they need to have. And through these skill sets, we can link the content from universities to teach someone how to be a data engineer. What's interesting is these skill sets are now being migrated to Coursera for Campus. So skill sets created in the workplace by managers and leaders saying, I need my cybersecurity people to have these skills, are now showing up in campuses where a student says, I want to be a cybersecurity analyst. Well, guess what? You don't have to guess. We will simply tell the student, this is the skills that employers are looking for cybersecurity analysts. Here are the skills that people in that job actually have. If you want to have that skill set, here are the courses that you should be taking, and you can actually benchmark your skills against people in those jobs today. So it's not like it was even 24 months ago. This is happening so fast that I think it'll be outdated I think generally people talk less and less about, there's such a big gap between higher education and employment, because the gap is vanishing pretty quickly.
Right, and think back a decade ago where that migration was inconceivable between sort of a corporate training program and what actually would be taught in a college or university classroom. It sounds like the primary benefit is accessibility, but that accessibility opens up all kinds of doors in terms of, I was just thinking, as Brooke was talking about, the scale that you can get in recruiting nationally, filling a cohort nationally or even internationally, and then how specific you can be, right? You could never offer a specific tech stack. You'd never be able to fill that program locally, but you can fill it nationally or internationally as well.
And the experience, I think that was your point. It's access, and through access and scale, it opens up experiences that would absolutely be totally impossible in an on-ground program, in terms of cohort, in terms of network, in terms of the sharing of ideas and creation of new ideas.
That's great. So good, Vista? Yeah.
I think one other thing we have to keep in mind is the term cohort is getting outdated. We've talked about cohort as being starting on the 2nd of February, 26th of January, the 13th of August, and if you miss it, you're out of luck. That's not what the employer wants. That's not what the employee wants. If I wake up one day and I decide I need to get a certain amount of knowledge which will be relevant to the workforce and for me to do better, I shouldn't have to wait 6 months to a year to be able to get it. That's one thing that these programs really make possible, that you can actually join when you want. Now, of course, there are universities who say we shouldn't have that much flexibility. But in the end, it is going to come to whenever I, as the learner, want the information, I should be able to do it. And whenever I, as the provider of the information, need to have it updated to make it relevant to the workforce, I can do it as well. And that's one of the great advantages that we have in this.
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I think that's, to riff on what Jeff was saying, I think that's one of the most important things that we've got here is that, for example, in our BAAS program, I've heard a lot, even yet here in 2021 at this conference, about either or. It's an either or, corporate or higher education. And I really feel like it's a both and. We've said it for years. And, so for example, we accept the Google IT certificate for credit as part of the bachelor's completion program. So our students can have those exact skills that employers are requesting, sometimes even go back and work for those companies, and also have the bachelor's degree, which we know there's just, mounds of data on what that means for their life and their career in education.
Yeah, and I think, when we developed the IMBA program, the model we used and we built in conjunction with Coursera, it's a stackable model. And so each credit-bearing course has a MOOC-based component. They can start that MOOC at any time. And many of our learners, our students enrolled in our degree program, started out as an open learner on the Coursera platform. And so they could get those skills now. We don't ask them to wait. And we change admission cycles to every 8 weeks. And so we're bringing in new cohorts. But their learning doesn't have to stop or start at any given point in time. And I think that's critical.
I think that's critical too. I do think, obviously at Western Governors University, we have start every month, and you can go at your own pace across 6 months, and every competency you earn is on your achievement transcript associated with skills data. We have multiple embedded certifications inside of every degree program, so you're earning value on the way to degree. I guess my point earlier was, I do think online enables and accelerates the ability to do this, but it's not impossible to do some of these things on ground. And so the modality question is interesting. I think it is about access. I think it is about experience at scale. It's about scale communities of learning and networking. But many of the ideas that we're talking about are not just online modality-based ideas. They actually are things that we could do on ground, but we don't, because our on-ground students and populations are perhaps different and not demanding the same kind of value and experience.
No, yeah, I've wrote a piece about how I feel like we've wasted the pandemic because in transitioning the entire higher education ecosystem to online, we haven't taken advantage of online in terms of, for example, moving to more of an active learning or flipped classroom environment in the traditional. Folks are excited to get back to what they used to be doing. I do want to, we have a panel here of obviously 5 believers and boosters in online, but I want to sort of look at the other side and maybe with the devil's advocate, think about, where online might fall short in terms of skill and capability building relative to cognitive skills, technical or platform skills, and in particular soft skills, and where you're seeing online, in particular online strategies succeed in some of the particularly soft skills, and where you feel like, you wouldn't want to really run a program completely online because you can't do everything in an online environment that you could do on ground. And Jeff looks like he wants to kick us off.
Well, I guess, so part of it from my perspective that I look at a lot is in the last 18 months, every office in the world pretty much has been closed. Pretty much. Certainly Coursera has been closed for 18 months. We decided when we closed that we would never force an employee to come back to the office. We just said, this is the way it's going to be from now on. We'll have offices, you can come back if you want to, but we're going to build a company that recruits from the absolute best talent anywhere they are in the world, anywhere they are in this country. And we're going to learn how to work a new way to make it more equal and have access to the best talent in the world. That's what we're going to do. What's interesting is we've now been running the company for 18 months with nobody being in an office, and we're highly productive. Now, there's things that I miss. I miss having drinks. I'm having a lot of fun at this conference. It's really nice to see people and have drinks and see Brooke. It's great. So I'm not saying you could do everything online. But for 18 months, almost every knowledge worker in the world has not been in an office together. You think there are soft skills that are required when you're trying to have a conversation on Zoom, when you're trying to collaborate in Google Docs and all this stuff? There are. Just because it's soft skills doesn't mean you have to be in the same room to do it. And increasingly, the way we're all going to be employees in companies around the world, we're going to be working remotely and digitally. So learning soft skills online is really about how to learn to work with other people online, and it doesn't mean you have to be in the same room. So I think there's social celebrations that still have to happen in the real world, and hopefully we'll be doing that at work soon and on campuses. I think students will be enjoying that again soon. But I think soft skills can be definitely learned. It's more about the way you structure projects and the way people integrate, negotiate, communicate, and influence each other.
Well, and I really believe, at WGU and in other online programs that I've worked for, at WGU we have over 3,000 competencies we teach, and at least a third of them are quote-unquote soft skills, what we call enduring skills that have to do with thinking and being and doing. And part of the challenge there is that you really do need to understand instructional teaching and learning pathways to mastery of those skills, and you need to understand how to assess those skills through performance-based assessments that actually validate whether or not individuals have them. And I think in online, the technologies are advancing in such a way, the environments for teaching and learning are advancing, and the environments for assessment are advancing in ways that we can actually do highly accurate validation of quote-unquote soft skills in the digital environment that I guarantee you is not happening in the first 2 years of gen ed on traditional campuses where students are sitting in their lecture hall taking bubble form tests.
I'll argue that this is not a modality. I've said for years, I think you can have a fantastic course online, or you can have a really bad course online. You can have a fantastic in-person course or a really bad in-person course. Instructional design matters. Instructional techniques matter. I think you can teach a lot of things. When I left the University of Illinois, the most popular online course was a dance course. Not the first thing people would think of.
Yep.
So it's also not just the modality, but how we present it. So the others have talked a little bit about social skills. So let's talk about cognitive skills, and let's talk about skills that are difficult for us to even grasp in a face-to-face environment. So let's take the very simple example of being a nuclear engineer and really trying to understand what happens when a nuclear facility goes hot. Or let's be a doctor and you want to get the bedside manner when a patient dies. How many of them get that experience? So do we want them to get that experience? We do, but we don't want the patient to die, and we don't want a nuclear reactor to go red. You can do that online. And I think that's the biggest misconception, is that online is PowerPoint, online is a talking head. It's not. It's farthest away from that as we can get. And we can do just about everything that we can do face-to-face, sometimes even better. And we should be taking those and incorporating them into our face-to-face instruction for those areas that can be supplemented. And we could do a great job by going online, by having hybrid, and having face-to-face with some technologies brought into class that have never been used before. For a very simple example, let's take the case of how many of us have been to the Louvre to see all the paintings out there? Raise your hands. Okay, how many of you would like your sons, daughters, or yourselves to have had that opportunity to do that? That is possible online today with an immersion that is far more than you would get by actually standing in front of a painting, because you could almost become part of the painting, just as some of you might have seen, let's say, the demonstration down below in terms of dreamscapes. That technology, if brought into our instruction on a daily basis, that's the power, and I'm not going to say that's the power of online education, that's the power of technology that it could bring to us, irrespective of the modality that we use.
I think one other thing to consider when you talk about soft skill development, I like to call them power skills. In a residential course, a lot of times there's not enough airtime. And in the online environment, it's a very inclusive environment. I'm very much an advocate for women in graduate business programs, and they share with us that they're much more confident sharing in an online environment because there's some anonymity to it. There are a lot of different opportunities where you can have smaller breakout rooms online, and they feel confident coming back and sharing with a larger group. And so in that case, the online environment can actually provide a much more inclusive environment, and you can ensure that your entire student distribution has an opportunity to build that skill, as opposed to just the traditional student that might take up more of the airtime in class and blocks others from participating.
Brooke, if I could just add, in the workplace, the equalization, and again, technology is not always the best thing, But when you're in a Zoom meeting, as opposed to being in a conference room or a boardroom, what you look like matters a lot less. How tall you are matters a lot less. What your body looks like matters a lot less. The clothes that you're wearing matter a lot less. The volume of your voice matters a lot less. Who you're sitting next to matters a lot less. It is an incredibly equalizing experience to be online. And we hear this from students, and honestly, I hear this from my employees, especially employees who, you don't always notice the ones who are not getting the fair shake. But when it gets a little more equal, they're the first ones to say, you know what, I kind of like certain elements of this. It feels like I've got a better shot and I have fewer disadvantages compared to being in a physical space.
I mean, it seems to me that we're accentuating not only best practices, but all the sort of optimal elements of what technology, what online learning can be. The reality is that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of students who are pursuing online degrees and programs that don't meet that promise today. And my question is, are online degrees working for those who have not yet attained what I would call a good first job, right? Whether it's they're just out of high school, or they've dropped out and they're working a frontline service job, or they were working in hospitality and no longer and looking for a new opportunity, but have never had that good first job. So can online work? What are best practices for that population of tens of millions of Americans who are kind of out of position relative to what employers are seeking? Adam, you want to start?
36 million Americans who have started college and haven't finished, and that was a number we sought to start to reverse. And so we're now a year into this bachelor's completion program online. This is largely an adult audience that has been left behind by higher education. They've got credits here, this university, technical credit, military, and have not had a great UX at all. And so we said, we've got to take this great program we have at the University of North Texas to the world. Coursera allows us to do that. And I was talking to our director of enterprise here, who's here today, and we were hearing from a student who is two really interesting stories just about how it's working and related to job relevancy. So one is a CEO of a small company and is now seeking to hire grads from his own cohort when they finish in December. Another one is working for Verizon right now and has a promotion waiting for her when she's completes, and I think she's completing in December too. So I think it's working really well. Now, one thing we haven't touched on much is services, and I think that's a whole nother thing we can do really, really well online. So we have these wraparound services that say to the student, hey, we know you've kind of been left behind. We're gonna do the opposite of that. We're gonna build you a degree plan before you even apply to the program. We're gonna do something and a lot of times students are really okay. Let's do this. So I think it's working very well, and I think this program we're doing is evidence of that.
I think adding into the service layer, of course, WGU was established for the exact same purpose 25 years ago. We now have 135,000 full-time students and over 66 degree programs that were originally designed for degree completers. And we have really high graduation rates for students who primarily work full-time while they're going to school. Way higher than the national average, and we're super proud of that. The reason that we can do that is because we do have this 360-degree community of care. They have a longitudinal mentor. They have assessments at the beginning of every course in their sequence to understand where they have to get in terms of mastery of that competency. They have blind assessment specialists who do all the evaluations and give targeted, personalized feedback. We're running thousands of students through these courses and competency assessments every day, and so we have our instructional designers and learning analytics folks who are continuously improving that curriculum and those assessments against that data, and that community of care is what really makes this digital experience sing for these students and so impactful for these students, so much so that over the last couple of years, what we have seen is a lot of students in that 18 to 24-year-old category who are first-time full-time, but who have to work full-time and be first-time full-time, seeking out WGU. And they're actually some of our most successful students. At first, we were a little worried about that because we thought, oh, we're designed for adult working professional students, not 18-year-old working professional students. And what we've learned is they carry this dynamic from high school, and they're ready to study, and they just need an accessible platform for education that works for them while they have to work full-time and get their first degree and first credential. And so we're finding that that community of care aspect of our online program is critical at any age, and it is foundational for being able to do this and do it well.
So, the community of care in an on-ground environment, you can't force a student to come to a tutoring session or a counseling session, but presumably in an online environment, you can kind of bring it to them
You can,
more easily. Based
on triggers, you can signal the need both to a community of care member, faculty member, as well as the student themselves. I think the other thing that's really interesting about the community of care model is these faculty work together as a team. There is no hierarchy where the kind of tenured faculty or the senior faculty is in one silo and the advisor is in another silo and the TA is in another silo. These people work together as a team around a case management capability so that they're all seeing a holistic view of the student and their progress, and they are all accountable to that student and to each other to support the journey towards success.
Right.
And
I'm curious to see if we have the same perspective from our more traditional university panelists.
So maybe I'll be a little more, let's say, controversial. We've talked about wraparound services, but they've been all around a degree. When we talk about students or learners, we managed to do this for an online, but there's no reason why we couldn't do it face-to-face. So anything I'm going to say now is just as applicable to face-to-face. We just don't do it as much. We used to have students who came to us for a degree purely because they were rich a century ago, or they came from the landed gentry, and so the second son went to a university, the first son took over the business. Today, that's no longer the case. We have learners who come because they need a job, and they need that outcome almost immediately. We should be able to, and we are able to, and there are lots of us who do that. We should be able to give them the amount of knowledge that is needed for that part of their career, going back to the question that you asked. So in the beginning, there should be on-ramps and off-ramps that allow them to jump on, take as much knowledge as they need, go back into the workforce or to their own responsibilities, kids, so elderly parents, at a slightly higher level of socioeconomic status so they can gain a little bit more, and then come back and get another credential, stack it, and then if you want, get a degree. But I think it needs to be that education needs to move now to what the student needs and where the student is, so that it actually becomes possible at any part of their career. Right. It's not just directly out of high school. It could be 20 years after they've started. It could be at the age of 60 when they're trying to do a new job. At any point of that, we should be able to give them knowledge in a package that can then be credentialed so that it is truly linked to the workforce. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is we give a lot of certificates and we give a lot of degrees, and we don't link them to the work that is there. It becomes very difficult for a learner who doesn't have the experience to try to figure out, is that going to make me better off than I was before I began?
Right. Brooke or Adam?
Yeah, I think it is, you ask about, from a more traditional public institution, I think it is something that's difficult for a traditional public Research One institution to wrap their head around. I will say the pandemic, though, probably advanced us at least 5, if not 10 years, because everyone was forced to move to a remote environment. They understand that you can deliver high quality, engaging education online. And so I think, at least at the University of Illinois, some minds have been changed, and we're more open as a campus to considering using online education to serve the more traditional 18 to 22-year-old that we only considered serving in a residential space before.
That's great.
Yeah, I agree with Brooke. At the University of North Texas, we certainly have, the majority of our students are 18 to 22-year-old residential students, but more and more they're taking that mix of online and on campus, and we can see that's hyper accelerated now as we're coming back fall 2021. I actually was just on a panel for the faculty at my university right before this via Zoom, and we were talking about exactly how to stream to students that might be in quarantine or ones that are and so it's definitely a new normal now. But your Research One universities, still coming along some. That's fair here, but quite a bit more open than in the past.
Well, certainly helped by providers like Coursera, who are, and I want to circle back to, the title of the panel is Job Relevant Degrees. And I know Coursera was agnostic or multimodal from the outset as to the degree. 2U with its acquisition of edX is moving in that direction. So the question is, online degree providers or institutions offering online degrees, how do they forestall unbundling into the kinds of skills-based certificate programs that Vistasp was talking about, or should we be even focused on that?
Yeah, I would say no. I don't want to forestall it. Like, we're charging ahead, right? And because that's how I believe we can add value for our learners. Even throughout our degree, our learners have an ability to earn micro-credentials along the way. It's built on the stackable model that we developed with Coursera, and the learners see a lot of value. It's amazing for a learner to earn a micro-credential partially way through the program. They can show their progression to their employer, right? And it also helps from a retention perspective because they're meeting these interim milestones, right? And they feel the value add. They can immediately return that value back to their organization, and it's recognized in a way that they can post out, on their LinkedIn profile, and they can use it. Our students have a very high rate of promotion in the program. The average raise for a student in our program is 22%. It's not that they have to complete the degree and then they see the value, right? And so we're very much, we're bullish on unbundling. And so I think the academic institutions that really take that approach, that's who I believe will succeed in the long run.
That's great. Vistasp?
Absolutely. We should be unbundling and rebundling. We shouldn't be constraining knowledge. We should allow knowledge as a university to be out there in the best way possible, and let the consumer, the learner, the student, whichever way you want to count that, let the consumer decide what is best for them.
That's right. I've said for a while, I'm not interested in selling a student more than they need. If they just need the Google IT certificate or the Facebook social media, great. If you want that as part of credit for a degree because that takes you further, that's great too. We have those options, non-credit, for credit, certificate, degree. That's for our customers, our students to decide. It's our job to put forward super high quality and a good pathway for them.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
One of the things that we're seeing around the world, we have probably 3,000 academic institutions using Coursera for Campus in almost every country now. And I think a lot of folks, I was a little bit surprised with the pandemic and the lockdown, a lot of investors flocked to work at home companies. So the Amazons, the Googles, the Instacarts, a lot of money went to them. Zoom did very well. Well, the VCs started writing a lot of checks to start EdTech companies. I don't know if y'all have noticed how many more EdTech companies there are now than there were before the pandemic. This is not going to stop, by the way. This is the beginning of the digital transformation of higher education globally. But part of what we're seeing is universities, colleges around the world coming to us and saying, we have competitors now. Our students that otherwise would have come to our college, they have a lot of other choices. All these other companies are showing up and they're teaching these things and they're getting these capabilities and the skills that employers want. How do we keep up? We say, well, at least we can help bring some of these other universities' courses that you can integrate into your curriculum, and Facebook and Google, into the college curriculum, and stackability between industry credentials and university credentials. Could be a degree, could be a certificate, could be all sorts of certifications. The unbundling's happening, but it is this rebundling as well, with value add on it.
I do think that part of the question at hand with unbundling or rebundling or any bundling, whether it's a big bundle like a degree or a little bundle like a certificate or a very little bundle like a badge, is that it is critical that those achievements are validated and they align with real-time or near real-time value in the marketplace. We're already struggling in higher education because many of our degrees do not have a verified and validated market value for students, whether that market is to go on to research or whether that market is to get a job, right? And unbundling them is not going to fix that, right? So one of the things that we've learned at WGU over the years, because we are competency-based, so we've always been aligned to skills. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I mean, we literally have 20 seconds and we're going to get cut off.
Sorry, that's something we've learned, and it's so critical to our time.
Thank you. So if you came here for disagreement or debate, you came to the wrong panel. But sometimes right is right. So I want to thank our panel of distinguished guests and welcome to the online future. Thank you.
Thank you.